Okay, so today I'm going to show you exactly what you need to start knitting. So first let's talk about yarn. This here is acrylic yarn and it's usually the cheapest option. You can find it in lots of shops and it's totally fine for getting started. I personally really like natural fibers more. I think they just feel nicer to work with in your hands. So let me show you a few options. This one here is merino wool. This is baby merino and it's incredibly soft. It's really nice for anything that will be close to the skin, like baby items, hats, scarves, or anything you want to feel gentle and soft. For example, I used this one to knit a baby hat, and I will link that pattern if you want to try it. Then there are these ones, which are from Ireland. Donegal Aran tweed, 100% wool. These are a bit more rustic and a little scratchier, but they're very warm. I've used them for hats for my family and they're perfect for cold weather. For example, I made this hat for my son and this one here for my partner years ago, and they still wear them in winter, so they last a long time. Another really fun option is self-striping yarn. This one changes color as you knit, so you get stripes automatically without having to switch yarns yourself. It's especially nice for things like socks, gloves, or scarves. I made this one and you can see how the stripes just happen naturally as you knit. And then finally, cotton yarn. Cotton is really good for things like dishcloths or summer projects because it's lighter and more breathable. It also washes really well and doesn't shrink. For example, I started this dishcloth here and it has a really nice clean feel when you're working with it. Now let's talk about knitting needles. For beginners, I usually recommend starting with needles that are around 4mm to 6mm. That's a comfortable size to learn with because the stitches are easy to see and hold. Knitting needles come in lots of different sizes, from very fine needles used for delicate projects to much thicker needles used for chunky scarves and blankets. And in general, larger needles create larger stitches and help projects grow more quickly, which can be encouraging when you're starting out. One thing that can be a little confusing is that needle sizes are labeled differently depending on where you live. Here in Europe, we usually use the size in millimeters. So a 4mm needle is simply called a 4mm needle. And in the United States, however, needles are given number sizes. For example, 4mm is approximately a US 6 and 6mm is US 10. And if you're using older knitting patterns from the UK, you will sometimes come across traditional UK needle sizes as well, which use a completely different numbering system. So don't worry if the numbers don't seem to match. It's usually easy to find a conversion chart online. The good news is that most modern yarn labels tell you which needle size is recommended. For example, this yarn suggests 4 to 4.5mm needles, and this cotton yarn recommends 2.5 to 3mm needles. So when you're starting out, it's perfectly fine to follow the recommendation on the yarn label. One thing I personally like are bamboo needles because they have a bit more grip, so the stitches don't slide off as easily, which can be really helpful when you're learning. Metal needles are smoother, but sometimes a bit slippery for beginners, so bamboo can feel more forgiving. You will also need just a few simple things: scissors, any kind is fine, and a tapestry needle for weaving in ends. And that's really it. The tapestry needle is just for tidying up at the end, like weaving in loose yarn tails so your work looks finished. So if you're just getting started, you really only need one ball of yarn, one pair of needles, around 4 to 5mm grade, scissors, and a tapestry needle. which is actually optional but useful. And that's enough to begin. And in the next video, we're going to use these supplies and learn how to cast on your very first stitches.